So now we're going to talk about how to change between fractions, decimals, and percents, right? It's just different versions of the same number. To express a fraction as a decimal, if the denominator is a power of 10, in other words, powers of 10, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, etc., right? If the denominator is a power of 10, because these are our decimal places, we can just take the numbers that's behind the decimal, take the numbers in the numerator and put behind the decimal. So for example, let's say we had 2 and 5, let's make it 51 thousandths. Okay, since this is a multiple of 10, now the whole number is just your whole number. It's going to stay a whole number. But your decimal, you're going to take these numbers in the numerator and make them end 1, 2, 3. This is 3 place values, tenths, hundredths, thousandths in the end. So you want that 1 to be in the thousandths, and put a placeholder if you need to make their 3 digits over here. This number is going to end right in the thousandths place. Okay, if the denominator is not a multiple of 10, divide the numerator by the denominator. So let's say your fraction was 7/8. It's not a multiple of 10 in the denominator, and I can't make it a multiple of 10. Then I'm just going to say, what's 7 divided by 8? Okay, add my decimal and a few zeros and do your division. And then whatever answer you have up here, that'll be your decimal answer. To express a decimal as a fraction, okay, find the place value of the last digit in the decimal. So this time we're going backwards. Put that in the denominator, that place value in the denominator, and put the digits behind the decimal in the numerator. Okay, so for example, if we started with 2.051 and we wanted to make it into a fraction, okay, then the whole number we know is 2, but this would be tenths, hundredths, thousandths, or in other words, I need 3 zeros in that denominator, and the numbers behind the decimal are my numerator. To express a fraction as a percent, if the denominator is 100, you can just drop the 100 and add a percent, because this percent sign right here, this percent sign, percent, is the same thing as saying per 100, right? Percent, that's why we call penny cents, because there's 100 of them in a dollar. So a percent and this per 100 are interchangeable. So if the denominator is 100, like if I had a fraction that was, 17 hundredths, I could just change that to 17% instead of 17 per 100, 17%. Okay? Otherwise, if the denominator is not 100, do your division like we talked about right here, and then you'll have a decimal, and you can change your decimal to a percent, which we'll talk about right down here. Okay, to express a percent as a fraction, if we had a percent number, so if I had that number that is 17% and I wanted to write it as a fraction, I just got to say, oh, instead of percent, it's 17 per 100. Then don't forget to reduce your fraction if it will, right? To express a decimal as a percent, you're going to move the decimal 2 places to the right and add the percent sign. To express a percent as a decimal, move it 2 places left. That's because a percent means per 100. So you're always multiplying or dividing by 100. Okay, so people usually get that, but what confuses them is, which direction do I move it? Think about the alphabet. The letter D comes before P. So if I'm thinking about decimal versus percent, if I'm starting with a decimal and moving to a percent, I would move my decimal point in that direction. If I'm starting with a percent and going to a decimal, right? Starting with a percent and going to a decimal, I would move it in that direction. So let's take that 2.051. 2.051. This is a decimal number. If I wanted to make it a percent, right, then I think, oh, what kind of sort of decimal percent? I would go to the right 2 times. So that would be 205.1 and add the percent sign. If it started as the percent, then now I'm starting with the percent, a P. I want to go backwards to get to the decimal, so I would move it 2 places this way, 2.051. And don't forget to drop that percent sign because I've changed it to a decimal number now. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Okay, so we're converting all of these to a decimal. Okay, hey, this one has a multiple of 10 denominator. So I can just put that 9 as my number, whatever's in the numerator, and I need to have, it needs to be 2 spots after the decimal point. So if I put a decimal point right here to make that 9 end up in the hundredths position, right? Because there's 2 zeros. So that's 0.09. Okay, 3/4. I could either make this 100. I could make the denominator 100. 75 hundredths. And then, oh, the 75 goes in the decimal and it needs to end 2 spots over. 1, 2. Or I could divide it. 3 divided by 4. This is a division sign, right? So 3 divided by 4. Numerator inside. Add a decimal and some zeros. 4 doesn't go into 3. 4 goes into 30 7 times. 7 times 4 is 28. Subtract. Bring down. 4 goes into 25 times. 5 times 4 is 20. And when there's no remainder left, there's your decimal. Same thing we got over here, right? Now 8 I cannot make into 100. So I'm going to make that 5 divided by 8. Add some zeros and do your division. 8 does not go into 5. 8 goes into 50 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. Subtract and bring down. 8 goes into 22 times. 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract and bring down. 8 goes into 45 times. 5 times 8 is 40. And then when there's no remainder, you're finished. There it is as a decimal. 0.625. Okay, so if your denominator is 100, or you can make it 100, you can just go right to a decimal. If your denominator is not 100, use division. Okay, convert to a percent. Oh, look, this just says percent right there, per 100, right? So I can just make that 9%. If your denominator is 100, you can just make it 9%. So I can do the same thing right here. I can make this denominator 100. And then once it's per 100, that's the exact same thing as saying percent. So I can change the per 100 to percent. Or I could have done my division and gotten a decimal number. And then once you have a decimal, okay, D comes before P, so I would move my decimal that direction, and it's always 2 times. So 75, and don't forget to add your percent sign. Same thing here. I can't make the denominator 100, so I would do that division. Okay, and I'm going now from a decimal to a percent. So 62.5%. Okay, convert to a fraction. If I have a decimal, okay, numbers before the point are the whole number. Okay, any numbers behind the decimal are my numerator. And then I just have to figure out how many zeros to put on my denominator. Tenths, hundredths, or a 1 with 2 zeros. Now, 37 over 100 doesn't simplify, but I got to always check that. Okay, 12% convert to a fraction. Oh, this is 12 per 100. Percent per 100, interchangeable, right? But now I got to simplify that. These are both divisible by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 100 divided by 4 is 25. Okay, same thing. 5 3/7 per 100. Now, I just had to figure out how to simplify this thing. Okay, so this is just a division symbol, right? So that's 5 3/7. 5 3/7 divided by 100. I got to know how to divide fractions. If any of them's fractions, I need them all to be fractions. So let's make this. 7 times 5 is 35. 38/7. 38/7. And to multiply fractions, you change it. To divide fractions, you change it to multiply. Copy, dot, flip, remember? And then you multiply straight across. 38 over 700. Oh, they're both even, so I can reduce that by 2. 38 divided by 2 is 19. 700 divided by 2, 350. Okay, now I'm going to a percent. I have a decimal, and I want to convert it to a percent, so that means I'm going to move in this direction, right? So 1, 2 be 4,289.3%. This time I've got the percent and I'm going to a decimal, so I'd move my point in this direction, 2 times always. So the point would be there. I need a placeholder, 0, 2, 3. Okay, practice that. Let me know how it goes.